Resurrection is the concept of a living being coming back to life after death. It is a religious concept, where it is used in two distinct respects. A belief in the resurrection of individual souls that is current and ongoing, or else a belief in a singular resurrection of the dead at the end of the world. The resurrection of the dead is a standard eschatological belief in the Abrahamic religions. In a number of ancient religions, a dying and rising God is a deity which dies and resurrects. The death and resurrection of Jesus is an example of resurrection, and this instance is the central focus of Christianity. The soul is believed by some to be the divine and immortal part of the human being, and some believe it is the actual vehicle by which people are resurrected. Theological debate ensues with regard to what kind of resurrection is factual, either a spiritual resurrection with a spirit body into heaven, or a material resurrection with a restored human body. While most Christians believe Jesus' resurrection from the dead and ascension to heaven was in a material body, a very small minority believe it was spiritual. There are documented rare cases of the return to life of the clinically dead which are classified scientifically as examples of the Lazarus syndrome, a term originating from the biblical story of the resurrection of Lazarus. Ancient religions in the Near East. The concept of resurrection is found in the writings of some ancient non-Abrahamic religions in the Middle East. A few extant Egyptian and Canaanite writings allude to dying and rising gods such as Osiris and Baal. Sir James Frazer in his book The Golden Bough relates to these dying and rising gods, but many of his examples, according to various scholars, distort the sources, taking a more positive position. Trygve Mettinger argues in his recent book that the category of rise and return to life is significant for the following deities: Ugaritic Baal, Melkart, Adonis, Eshmun, Osiris and Dumuzi. Judaism and Samaritanism. Jews and Samaritans believe that Yahweh, the God of Israel, will one day give Tehayat HaMetim, or life to the dead, to the righteous. Jews base this belief on the prophecies regarding the event in the Tanakh, in the books of Yeshayahu, Jehezekiel, and Daniel. Samaritans base it solely on a passage called the Hayazenu in the Torah, since they only accept the Pentateuch and reject the rest of the Hebrew Bible. Jews believe that both the righteous and the wicked who are deceased of this world will be given life and judged. They believe the righteous of Israel and the righteous among the Gentiles will have eternal life on earth, while the wicked will be punished and executed. Samaritans believe that only the righteous of Israel will be resurrected and given eternal life on earth. There are three explicit examples in the Hebrew Bible of people being resurrected from the dead. The prophet Elijah prays and God raises a young boy from death. Elisha raises the son of the Shunammite woman. This was the very same child whose birth he previously foretold. A dead man's body that was thrown into the dead Elisha's tomb is resurrected when the body touches Elisha's bones. During the period of the Second Temple, there developed a diversity of beliefs concerning the resurrection. The concept of resurrection of the physical body is found in 2 Maccabees, according to which it will happen through recreation of the flesh. Resurrection of the dead also appears in detail in the extra-canonical books of Enoch, in Apocalypse of Baruch, and 2 Esdras. According to the British scholar in ancient Judaism Philip R. Davies, there is little or no clear reference, either to immortality or to resurrection from the dead, in the Dead Sea Scrolls texts. Both Josephus and the New Testament record that the Sadducees did not believe in an afterlife, but the sources vary on the beliefs of the Pharisees. The New Testament claims that the Pharisees believed in the resurrection, but does not specify whether this included the flesh or not. According to Josephus, who himself was a Pharisee, the Pharisees held that only the soul was immortal and the souls of good people will be reincarnated and pass into other bodies, while the souls of the wicked will suffer eternal punishment. Paul, who also was a Pharisee, said that at the resurrection what is sown as a natural body is raised a spiritual body. Jubilees seems to refer to the resurrection of the soul only. or to a more general idea of an immortal soul. According to Herbert C. Bridger, writing in Reform Judaism's Hebrew Union College Annual, the family tomb is the central concept in understanding biblical views of the afterlife. Bridger states that it is not mere sentimental respect for the physical remains that is the motivation for the practice, but rather an assumed connection between proper sepulture and the condition of happiness of the deceased in the afterlife. According to Bridger, the early Israelites apparently believed that the graves of family, or tribe, united into one, and that this unified collectivity is to what the biblical Hebrew term Sheol refers, the common grave of humans. Although not well defined in the Tanakh, Sheol in this view was a subterranean underworld where the souls of the dead went after the body died. The Babylonians had a similar underworld called Aralu, and the Greeks had one known as Hades. For biblical references to Sheol, see Genesis chapter 42 verse 38, Isaiah chapter 14 verse 11, Psalm chapter 141 verse 7, Daniel chapter 12 verse 2, Proverbs chapter 7 verse 27, and Job chapter 10 verses 21, 22, and 17-16, among others. According to Bridger, other biblical names for Sheol were Abaddon, found in Psalm chapter 88 verse 11, Job chapter 28 verse 22, and Proverbs chapter 15 verse 11, Bor, found in Isaiah chapter 14 verse 15, 24-22, Ezekiel chapter 26 verse 20, and Shakhat, found in Isaiah chapter 38 verse 17. Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 8. Zen Buddhism. There are stories in Buddhism where the power of resurrection was allegedly demonstrated in Chan or Zen tradition. One is the legend of Bodhidharma, the Indian master who brought the Ekayana school of India to China that subsequently became Chan Buddhism. The other is the passing of Chinese Chan master Puhua and is recounted in the record of Linji. Puhua was known for his unusual behavior and teaching style, so it is no wonder that he is associated with an event that breaks the usual prohibition on displaying such powers. Here is the account from Irmgard Schloegels, the Zen teaching of Rinzai. One day at the street market, Fuke was begging all and sundry to give him a robe. Everybody offered him one, but he did not want any of them. The master, Linji, made the superior buy a coffin, and when Fuke returned, said to him, "There, I had this robe made for you." Fuke shouldered the coffin, and went back to the street market, calling loudly, "Rinzai had this robe made for me. I am off to the east gate to enter transformation." The people of the market crowded after him, eager to look. Fuke said, "No, not today. Tomorrow, I shall go to the south gate to enter transformation." And so for 3 days. Nobody believed it any longer. On the 4th day, and now without any spectators, Fuke went alone outside the city walls, and laid himself into the coffin. He asked a traveler who chanced by to nail down the lid. The news spread at once, and the people of the market rushed there. On opening the coffin, they found that the body had vanished. But from high up in the sky they heard the ring of his hand bell. Ancient Greek religion. In ancient Greek religion, a number of men and women were made physically immortal as they were resurrected from the dead. Asclepius was killed by Zeus, only to be resurrected and transformed into a major deity. Achilles, after being killed, was snatched from his funeral pyre by his divine mother Thetis and resurrected, brought to an immortal existence in either Luce, Elysian plains or the islands of the blessed. Memnon, who was killed by Achilles, seems to have received a similar fate. Alcmene, Castor, Heracles, and Melicertus were also among the figures sometimes considered to have been resurrected to physical immortality. According to Herodotus's histories, the 7th century BC sage Aristeas of Proconnesus was first found dead, after which his body disappeared from a locked room. Later he found not only to have been resurrected but to have gained immortality. Many other figures, like a great part of those who fought in the Trojan and Theban wars, Menelaus, and the historical pugilist Cleomedes of Astupalia, were also believed to have been made physically immortal, but without having died in the first place. Indeed, in Greek religion, immortality originally always included an eternal union of body and soul. The philosophical idea of an immortal soul was a later invention, which, although influential, never had a breakthrough in the Greek world, as may be witnessed even into the Christian era, not least by the complaints of various philosophers over popular beliefs. Traditional Greek believers maintained the conviction that certain individuals were resurrected from the dead and made physically immortal, and that, for the rest of us, we could only look forward to an existence as disembodied and dead souls. This traditional religious belief in physical immortality was generally denied by the Greek philosophers. Writing his lives of illustrious men in the 1st century CE, the Middle Platonic philosopher Plutarch's chapter on Romulus gave an account of the mysterious disappearance and subsequent deification of this first king of Rome, comparing it to traditional Greek beliefs such as the resurrection and physical immortalization of Alcmene and Aristeas the Proconnesian. For they say Aristeas died in a fuller's workshop, and his friends coming to look for him, found his body vanished, and that some presently after, coming from abroad, said they met him traveling towards Croton. Plutarch openly scorned such beliefs held in traditional ancient Greek religion, writing, "Many such improbabilities do your fabulous writers relate, deifying creatures naturally mortal." The parallel between these traditional beliefs and the later resurrection of Jesus was not lost on the early Christians. As Justin Martyr argued, when we say, Jesus Christ, our teacher, was crucified and died, and rose again, and ascended into heaven, we propose nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you consider sons of Zeus. There is, however, no belief in a general resurrection in ancient Greek religion, as the Greeks held that not even the gods were able to recreate flesh that had been lost to decay, fire or consumption. The notion of a general resurrection of the dead was therefore apparently quite preposterous to the Greeks. This is made clear in Paul's Areopagus discourse, after having first told about the resurrection of Jesus, which makes the Athenians interested to hear more. Paul goes on, relating how this event relates to a general resurrection of the dead. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to men that all everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead. Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some began to sneer, but others said, "We shall hear you again concerning this." Christianity. In Christianity, resurrection most critically concerns the resurrection of Jesus, but also includes the resurrection of Judgment Day, known as the resurrection of the dead by those Christians who subscribe to the Nicene Creed, as well as the resurrection miracles done by Jesus and the prophets of the Old Testament. Some churches distinguish between raising the dead and a resurrection. Resurrection of Jesus. Christians regard the resurrection of Jesus as the central doctrine in Christianity. Others take the incarnation of Jesus to be more central. However, it is the miracles, and particularly his resurrection, which provide validation of his incarnation. According to Paul, the entire Christian faith hinges upon the centrality of the resurrection of Jesus and the hope for a life after death. The Apostle Paul wrote in his first letter to the Corinthians, "If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are to be pitied more than all men. But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep." Resurrection miracles. During the ministry of Jesus on earth, before his death, Jesus commissioned his 12 apostles to, among other things, raise the dead. In the New Testament, Jesus is said to have raised several persons from death. These resurrections included the daughter of Jairus shortly after death, a young man in the midst of his own funeral procession, and Lazarus, who had been buried for 4 days. According to the Gospel of Matthew, after Jesus' resurrection, many of those previously dead came out of their tombs and entered Jerusalem, where they appeared to many. Similar resurrections are credited to Christian apostles and saints. Peter allegedly raised a woman named Dorcas, and Paul the apostle revived a man named Eutychus who had fallen asleep and fell from a window to his death, according to the Book of Acts. Preceding the apostolic era, many saints were said to resurrect the dead, as recorded in Orthodox Christian hagiographies. Most Christians understand these miraculous resurrections to be of a different nature than the resurrection of Jesus and the future resurrection of the dead. The raising of Lazarus and others from the dead could also be called resuscitations, or reanimations. Since the life given to them is presumably temporary in nature, there is no suggestion in the Bible or hagiographic traditions that these people became truly immortal. In contrast, the resurrection of Jesus and the future resurrection of the dead will abolish death once and for all. Resurrection of the dead. Christianity started as a religious movement within first-century Judaism, and it retains what the New Testament itself claims was the Pharisaic belief in the afterlife and resurrection of the dead, whereas this belief was only one of many beliefs held about the world to come in Second Temple Judaism, and was notably rejected by both the Sadducees and, according to Josephus, the Pharisees. This belief became dominant within early Christianity, and already in the Gospels of Luke and John included an insistence on the resurrection of the flesh. This was later rejected by Gnostic teachings, which instead continued the Pauline insistence that flesh and bones had no place in heaven. Most modern Christian churches continue to uphold the belief that there will be a final resurrection of the dead and world to come, perhaps as prophesied by the Apostle Paul when he said, "He hath appointed a day, in the which he will judge the world, and there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and unjust." Belief in the resurrection of the dead, and Jesus' role as judge, is codified in the Apostles' Creed, which is the fundamental creed of Christian baptismal faith. The Book of Revelation also makes many references about the day of judgment when the dead will be raised up. Difference from Platonic philosophy. In Platonic philosophy and other Greek philosophical thought, at death the soul was said to leave the inferior body behind. The idea that Jesus was resurrected spiritually rather than physically even gained popularity among some Christian teachers, whom the author of 1 John declared to be antichrists. Similar beliefs appeared in the early church as Gnosticism. However, in Luke chapter 24 verse 39, the resurrected Jesus expressly states, "Behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones as you see I have." Islam. Belief in the day of resurrection, Yawm al-Qiyamah, is also crucial for Muslims. They believe the time of Qiyamah is preordained by God but unknown to man. The trials and tribulations preceding and during the Qiyamah are described in the Quran and the Hadith, and also in the commentaries of scholars. The Quran emphasizes bodily resurrection, a break from the pre-Islamic Arabian understanding of death. Disappearances. As knowledge of different religions has grown, so have claims of bodily disappearance of some religious and mythological figures. In ancient Greek religion, this was a way the gods made some physically immortal, including such figures as Cleitus, Ganymede, Menelaus, and Tithonus. After his death, Psychonus was changed into a swan and vanished. In his chapter on Romulus from Parallel Lives, Plutarch criticizes the continuous belief in such disappearances, referring to the allegedly miraculous disappearance of the historical figures Romulus, Cleomedes of Astypalia, and Croesus. In ancient times, Greek and Roman pagan similarities were explained by the early Christian writers, such as Justin Martyr, as the work of demons. with the intention of leading Christians astray. In somewhat recent years it has been learned that Jesus, the savior of Tibet, at the end, chants on a mountaintop and his clothes fall empty to the ground. The body of the first guru of the Sikhs, Guru Nanak Dev, is said to have disappeared and flowers were left in place of his dead body. Lord Raglan's hero pattern lists many religious figures whose bodies disappear, or have more than one sepulchre. B. Travan, author of The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, wrote that the Inca Viracocha arrived at Cusco in the Pacific Sea coast where he walked across the water and vanished. It has been thought that teachings regarding the purity and incorruptibility of the hero's human body are linked to this phenomenon. Perhaps, this is also to deter the practice of disturbing and collecting the hero's remains. They are safely protected if they have disappeared. The first such case mentioned in the Bible is that of Enoch. Enoch is said to have lived a life where he walked with God, after which he was not, for God took him. In Deuteronomy, Moses is secretly buried. Elijah vanishes in a whirlwind. 2 Kings. After hundreds of years, these two earlier biblical heroes suddenly reappear, and are seen walking with Jesus, then again vanish. Mark, Matthew and Luke. The last time he is seen, Luke alone tells of Jesus leaving his disciples by ascending into the sky.